Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Good. Excellent. I'm unmuted. Today is April 6th already. Wow, 2021. And today's talk is The Great Sell-Off. Top songwriters cash out before the collapse. But before I get into that, let me turn off the irritating music, if you want to call it that. Let's hear this beat first. Can you hear that? Okay, I'm not just doing that for gratuitous purposes. It fits in with today's talk, which is about the capture and control of the popular music industry. And I'm going to try to take it slowly. And if need be, I'll carry it over to the Thursday session. Hi, Horse Sense 222. And I see Norman Smith is there, a fellow musician. And I'll try not to nerd out too much, Norman. You know how that goes. You get couple of guitar players together and we start talking about instruments and gear and all of that. And I want to retain the little audience that I have. But nonetheless, this is an important talk for everybody. And you don't necessarily have to be an expert in music. If you're alive and you're sentient and just going about your business every day, this affects you. Short of food and water, your aural, A-U-R-A-L environment, which we take for granted. And if you think I'm wrong about that, just try to go into a complete anechoic chamber that is no sound whatsoever, or go into a sensory deprivation tank when you can hear nothing, feel nothing, sense nothing. All you have is your own pure neural activity going on. Most people go insane literally will go insane fairly quickly. Oddly enough, and I'm not really imputing any sort of gender bias to this, but oddly enough, it is women that are best able to handle sensory deprivation, some of them for incredibly long stretches of time. Just the thought of it myself horrifies me. So music, and it's really boiling down to frequencies, is essential to our well-being and our survival in the past, the present, and into the future. And I'm going to talk about the future today because our aural, that is our music legacy, the frequencies are being tampered with. First, they're being captured, and they're going to be controlled, and some of it will be doled out back to us selectively, of course, perhaps if we're well behaved. So today's description had it that I'm going to go past the underlying reasons why top tier songwriters like Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon, Neil Young is selling half of his songwriting catalog. Why all of them are kind of doing it now? Seems like kind of random and just sort of all of a sudden. Is there some kind of new law or code that's being passed? Perhaps so. I don't know. Maybe their business managers are telling them, hey, Neil, you got to sell now. Otherwise, you're really going to be socked with a huge bill in 2021. Perhaps so. And of course, if you want to go with a more conventional explanation, you might think that, well, some of these top tier singer songwriters, the people who own the copyrights to their music, their compositions, they were paid a visit by men in black suits, very discreet, business attire, and said they showed them. They had a little their phone and showed them clips of the memorial of the Michael Jackson funeral, or maybe some reportage on CNN about how Prince just all of a sudden died. He was in perfect health. He was touring. And as you know, Michael Jackson was getting ready for a worldwide tour. And all of a sudden, they just gone. They were boom. And we were just in mourning. The whole world was just broken up by that. And the usual tributes followed and whatnot. And, if you were here with me last time when I talked about the great Robin Williams, correct? And I have some suspicions, and many of you do, based on your comments. Thank you very much for your comments. I have such a great audience. They're way ahead of me in many respects, and I like the back and forth. Speaking of which, by the way, I should tell you very quickly because I want to get into this. I do have a meeting tomorrow with you all, office hours for the Patreons on Wednesday, tomorrow, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So all the Patreon members will get the link going out later this afternoon. And we'll see you tomorrow. Hope you can make it. And we can just discuss this and other matters. Let me also quickly announce the long-awaited arrival of another one of George Webb's books. This one's titled Spray It in Dutch. Spray It in Dutch. And this one has a really interesting cover. It's one of those dual covers. You fold it out and it's a complete panorama here. And I'll let you marvel at it, but it makes this guy look like a reptile, which he probably is. He's probably not a human life form. He's probably a cold-blooded lizard, like a lot of these people, right? That's part of the bloodlines, right? That's why they're called blue bloods. Anyway, so check this out, and I'll ask George about this book tomorrow. I'm on with him, by the way. He's as you know, he's down in Tampa for about a week and a half of meeting people, signing books, but equally importantly, meeting authors and doing his research. And George, he's a nonstop worker. He is the hardest working man in the independent research field, and it's really gives me a lot of hope that he's going into publishing as well. And that's perfectly in tune with today's topic, which is about the control or the capture and control of the music publishing and eventually music distribution, which I'll get into. Now, I'm beginning with the premise that what we're seeing now with what I call the great sell-off is very much linked to what is being promoted to us as the Great Reset. Correct? Oop, I might have said, be careful. I don't want to be thrown off the stream here. I think I'm on the right track here. Unfortunately, your people on YouTube and the mainstream press, of course, which is controlled by the same people who control the music industry and the publishing industry, and they run all the law firms and the accounting firms that manage all this this business, right? But I came across a really interesting editorial by a individual on YouTube who I respect quite a bit. His name is Rick Beato, Beato. Check him out. Subscribe to him. I do. I've been subscribing to him for, 2, 3, 4 years. Quite a long time. And I've seen his subscriptions just grow just stratospherically, just boom, boom, boom. And I think he's over at 2 million now. So he is a certifiable YouTube celebrity, YouTube star, and all the pros in the business, the musicians themselves. In fact, Eric Johnson was interviewed by Rick Beato in studio, which means Eric Johnson was down in the Atlanta area to be, but that's where Rick Beato is based, to sit in his studio and to answer questions that people in music are really obsessed about. And this is the king of music obsession and sound and tones. In fact, that was, this, Norman Smith. That was one of the titles of his great albums, Tones. He's obsessive about it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all that might be coming to an end for duffers like myself. It's going to be relegated strictly to the ultra pros like Eric Johnson. And we're going to watch these people on YouTube playing their vintage instrument, playing maybe in live settings, but none of us will get to participate. We're going to take an increasingly more passive role in what used to be a communal activity, music, right? Back to the early days, right? A tribal as well as state level. People got together over food, drink, and music, and talking and chatting and all that. You can see where this is going, right? So they have to cut out music. They meaning the the central bankers who work for these larger hereditary families, and they're going to have their music. Believe me, they're going to be partying and feasting and orgying and doing whatever ultra wealthy. To call them wealthy doesn't really do them any justice. They're beyond wealth. They're lords of the universe, with pretensions of being gods themselves, and that will be their ultimate downfall. And we're going to try to um, push forward the process that will have them eat their own tail, so to speak, or consume each other first and then eat their own tail. That's why the Ouroboros is there. It's there not just as a representation of how power operates, but of how power also consumes itself eventually. It's a cosmic law. It's a universal law. Anyway, before I get too mystical, let me continue with Rick Beato. He's enormously popular. He specializes in popular music. He is a formally trained musician. He knows composition. He has his theory down, his music theory down tight. He used to teach more of it on the whiteboard. He's doing less and less theory type of work because there's tons of channels on YouTube that go through it, or you can study it on your own. A lot of it I know. I've just assimilated or studied on my own. So, I don't need to know more about key signatures and the cycle of fifths and whatnot. I'm getting into the actual materials of music. That is sound, that is frequencies, that is rhythms, that is beats. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. So if you think you know all there is about the music, hang in there because I'm going to blow your mind with some new insights, right? You're going to learn something here, and so am I, right? Because as I'm doing this, as I'm researching it, I'm learning. Teaching is about learning. Right. It's that's why I enjoyed it, because in order to give lectures and give talks, I had to prep myself. I had to really dig into the material, and in the process, it helps my own work. Right. So it's like a circle, right? And you're part of that circle. Thank you very much for joining me today. Anyway, you can catch this on YouTube, Rick Beato. That's the name of the channel too, as well as the individual. By the way, he used to teach music at, I think it was Rutgers. He has a great story behind that. He couldn't even get into the program originally. He wound up teaching until he left and went into independent production. He was a producer. I think he has a gold record. So he knows what he's talking about. He's been there. He has incredible foundational work in this area. He's not just some guy who's sitting in his mother's basement, or not that that's bad if that's all you can manage, who's giving opinions on this, that, and the other. So anyway, watch the April 3rd episode of Rick Beato. It's about a 15-minute post, I believe. And the title is, Why Don't Record Labels Believe in Young Artists? Well, I'm sure he's going to get a lot of views on that because that's the obvious question. And I don't disagree with the way he's framing the question. I don't disagree with the reasons that Rick Beato offers as to why record labels don't seem to be investing in young artists, which includes songwriters, right? Because Rick Beato lists the fact that Dylan is selling his songwriting catalog. It's a 9-figure deal. It's what? Let me see if I have the numbers written down. I don't think I recorded that, but $400 million. Bob Dylan, not coincidentally, picked up the Nobel Prize, right? That boosts up his worth. That pumps up his stock, figuratively speaking. And now, on the heels of those accolades, his catalog is probably valued at a much higher level. And I don't even know how they do value. I mean, there is a formula, but to me, it's quite mysterious. But the point is that he's selling it for $400 million. Sounds like, like not a lot of money for what Bob Dylan has put out to us over the decades now. I don't care if he's selling singles or he's no longer, as he was known back then, as the voice of his generation. I don't think he ever wanted that title anyway. But that's secondary to the larger point that not only Bob Dylan, But people, the likes of Stevie Nicks, of as you know her with Fleetwood Mac, but before that she was in a duo with Lindsey Buckingham, who I'm sorry to say had a falling out with Fleetwood Mac, and he had all kinds of health problems. And he's an incredible musician, true artist. Lindsey, not that Stevie Nicks is not, not that Fleetwood Mac, Mick Fleetwood, and Mick, I forgot his name. Yeah, I knew Mick Fleetwood and the other Mick Taylor. No, Mick Taylor's the guitar. I knew them when they were blues musicians. They were with John Mayall, and it's kind of still mind-boggling that they became part of this, the nucleus for this incredibly huge selling pop group of all time called Fleetwood Mac. Anyway, Stevie Nicks and her partner, hooked up Lindsey Buckingham with Fleetwood Mac, and that's what really made the Fleetwood Mac sound that you and I enjoy. From the late '70s, I guess it was. I don't own any Fleetwood Mac out. I have to tell you, I never bought the vinyl. I never went in back and bought the CDs. Maybe I should. Maybe I should get Rumors. Maybe I do. I'm sorry, I might have it, but it's not on my regular playlist. I tend not to live in the past. I'm always looking forward, unless it's really, goes back into my parents' generation. Then that to me is new. So Stevie Nicks of Fleetwood Mac sold her, or is in the process of selling her publishing rights for $100 million. Still a lot of money, but gosh, I don't know. Maybe some people in business suits, dark business suits, otherwise known as accountants slash enforcers, said, Stevie Nicks, you've had a great run. We've enjoyed your service to the company, and now you're going to sell your rights to us, just as we agreed prior to you hitting it so big with Fleetwood Mac. I think Bob Dylan falls in that category. He was with Columbia Records after all, and Columbia Records is connected all the way to the top. Paul Simon sold his publishing. I think Paul Simon was always in Columbia as well. And these are all people in their 70s, late 70s. I think Dylan is almost 80 now. Neil Young, who recently, well, not that recently, but finally became a U.S. citizen after criticizing America with Southern Man, and finally has his leg to stand on. I think he can legitimately criticize what's going on in America. I only wish he would talk to us about the real music business, the real music industry. Maybe that wasn't his job. Maybe that wasn't part of the deal. He is, after all, the son of a prominent, highly placed advertising exec. When you hear advertising, just substitute the word propaganda for that up in Canada, right? So Neil Young sold half of his songwriting rights to a firm called Hipgnosis, HIP. I think it's GNOSIS. I'm not sure. And that term there, that little bit of information, hypnosis, that has a dual meaning, doesn't it? Right? Hypnosis, like, yes, master, I will do everything you say. Right? Neuro-linguistic programming. But also, it's spelled, I think, GNOSIS, like Gnostic. Right? And we've talked about Gnosticism a little bit, then all the different manifestations of it in our popular as well as our elite culture. And at the highest levels, these people are Luciferians, as you know. So it's only right that he sells half of his his song rights to Hipgnosis. Check out that firm. I'm going to be looking that up later and trying to figure out their origins, who they're connected to. It probably will lead to NATO or the Pentagon or DARPA or, who knows, but it's not just some little hip capitalist firm. That's for sure. Something's behind it. So at the same time, to counter this influence, because I've seen it coming for a long time, not just from my own intellectual and creative enjoyment and curiosity, but from my survival, I've been going back through the Great American Songbook. This is one of the great contributions that American society and culture has contributed to the world, and it's very important. And that's one of the reasons why the younger generation are not being exposed to it, because in order to control the new generation, first the ties to previous generations has to be severed. That's why you get your Greta Thunberg, or you get these millennials who write these asinine editorials for the globalist publication, The Rag, founded by Jan Venner, called Rolling Stone, or whatever it is now. I'm sure in Britain, the New Musical Express and all that, they've all been co-opted. But I've been, for the last several years, been really studying, really going in closely to the work of perhaps, composers, writers like Jerome Kern, one of the great lyricists they work with, Dorothy Fields. Incredible wordplay do they exhibit. Let's see, I have one of their books here someplace. Just got it recently by Hal Leonard Publishers, The Great Hits of the 1930s. So I'm looking at the lyrics, I'm studying the melody lines and the harmonies and the arrangements as well as the lyrics. And it's a stark contrast, ladies and gentlemen, to what we're hearing, or what the most of the population of a certain generation, Greta Thunberg's generation perhaps, are listening to. And I'm not just talking about boomer nostalgia here, okay? Don't get me wrong. Don't write me off in such a cavalier fashion. I'm I'm more savvy than that. That's the word I'm trying to find without sounding too arrogant, right? Matt Dennis, incredible. These are still on CDs. Snap these up while you can, because these are going to go away. Right. And this is the true Bitcoin. This has energy in it. It's musical, creative energy, intellectual energy, from the lyrics, from all the studio musicians, and from the instruments themselves, from the recording technology. And I'll be talking about the recording technology in a moment, because that's part of the takeover, the control and capture. And Johnny Mercer with the Pied Pipers, a great songwriter himself, but a really incredible vocalist. And he had a group earlier called the Pied Pipers, that 4-part harmony, one woman, and three tenors, and a soprano lead. And many of you know this already, but Brian Wilson, the great American composer, Brian Wilson, studied the vocal groups of his parents' generation. People like, well, they are of his generation, the Four Freshmen, right? There were these 4-part harmony group, vocal harmony groups. They're kind of like barbershop harmonies, but sort of updated with a little bit of jazz extensions, a little bit more sophisticated voicings, let's call them. But beautiful, beautiful vocal work that you don't hear today. And again, I'm not doing a boomer type of critique here, because I know that there are good singers out there. I've been getting into D'Angelo after 20 years. Finally, because he's been out at least 20 years now. I'm finally getting around to D'Angelo, and he's a singer. He's an old school singer who I'm sure has went through his mother's and father's, maybe even his grandparents' record collection at home in order to form his own unique style. Very quickly, Dick Haymes. I'm doing the less obvious stars, like Ella Fitzgerald, Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra. We all know about them, and I'm looking at trying to investigate some of the earlier, or some of the, I won't call them second level, because Dick Haymes was important in his time, just as the other ones. Why isn't he now? I don't know. Maybe it's copyright. Maybe he didn't sell his catalog to the right people, so he's being suppressed. Who knows? At the same time, by the way, I'm looking at all the occultic, creepy music that is being produced in the world of art music. And this is someone you know. You know this person. You don't know her name, but you know her music. She's the one that did the soundtrack to, yes, Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. That's that creepy sort of gothic chant-like music that you hear in that scene where all them naked people in the Venetian mask are standing around, and Tom Cruise going, man, what did I get myself into? Well, that composer goes by the name of Jocelyn Pook, P-O-O-K, Pook, I guess it's pronounced. And this is her debut album, Deluge. I also have this anthology of what they call contemporary spiritual music. These are chants, and what it means is that they take the outward from what, and this is my snap uh, review because it's deeper than that. Get this and listen to it, but supposedly it's devotional music, but without the God, right? So it's atheist, uh, maybe even demonic, satanic music. That's the vibe I'm getting, and this is the vibe I'm getting from her music, and that's the vibe I got from Eyes Wide Shut, Jocelyn Pook here. And this album was re-released after she gained notoriety through the film Eyes Wide Shut with Stanley Kubrick. And the story goes, and she tells the story, so you go with it if you want to. It's apocryphal. It sounds too good to be true, but who knows? But she was friends with one of the choreographers in Eyes Wide Shut who happened to be playing her music during rehearsals, and Stanley Kubrick himself said, "Hey, what's that?" So, "Oh, yeah, it's a friend of mine, Jocelyn Pook." He said, "Well, get hook me up there." And before you know it, she was writing the soundtrack to Stanley Kubrick, and then her career as a composer and a performer, she's a vocalist herself, was cemented. So check her out. You know her. You've loved her for years and didn't know where she was coming from. I think she's coming from a very dark place, just like Stanley Kubrick. Either he was in a dark place, or he was warning, or he had been there and was bringing us back a warning not to follow suit. I think that's what was going on there. So he'll be a source of endless speculation, Stanley Kubrick, and he had help. He had the help of Jocelyn Pook here. So I'm looking at these, so the criticism that was lodged by Rick Beato, and he says that, well, it's the music company's fault, and in the old days, they would spend a lot of time with new talent. And he gives the example of YouTube. They had, 3 or 4 or 5 albums. They might have had us hit, on FM radio, but they didn't become U2 with Bonomo being cast into the role of a worldwide humanitarian savior. And you can tell I mean that with irony, because I don't like Bonomo. I call him Boner, but he calls himself Bono. And each one of the band members, of course, has some sort of nom de musique, some sort of alter ego, and maybe they have alters as well. Maybe that's the reason why Bono Houston became Boner or Bonomo. But somewhere along the line, they gotten to, and they got the offer. They couldn't refuse, and they became big, huge. And of course, I've spoken of them earlier, especially when George and crew were down in New Orleans, because Daniel Lanois has a studio there. He's a Cajun, right? And the Acadian history and all the religious wars that were fought out on U.S. and Canadian and British soil. Yeah, those wars are still going on. Now it's sonic warfare. It's music warfare. It's spiritual warfare, as some people like to talk about. I don't use that expression because it's been overused and trivialized. But let's go with sonic warfare. So, yeah, it was Daniel Lanois who started producing U2 and really made them blow up, right, so to speak. What was it about his sound? I'm still trying to figure out Lanois. I'm looking at his solo albums. I'll get back to you, but I think there's some magic pixie dust in there. There's some sonic pixie dust that I'm going to try to figure out. And I'm going to great lengths, ladies and gentlemen, you have to try to do the detective work. I mean, I haven't got myself a Moog synthesizer. It's called 37, the subsequent 37. It's one of the cheaper ones, but I can dial in sound waves, right? The sawtooth, rectangle, sine waves, and I'm trying to figure out how sound waves work on a very basic elemental level. This is like chemistry, and I've already showed you some of these pedals that I've been working on. I might as well take some time to describe this and nerd out just a little bit, because this includes you, ladies and gentlemen. You're hearing this, you're experiencing this technology, whether you're aware of it. I'm making you conscious of it. Of course, it's made in China to save costs, but this particular brand, it's called Source Audio, Brand names are important, right? Source. What source? Where? Hades? Hell? uh, who is the source? Is that a Gnostic source like Hypnosis that bought half of Neil Young's catalog? Is it Columbia record? Who's the goddess Columbia? Ask yourself that. So this is called Source Audio. That's made in China, but it's designed and engineered in Massachusetts, specifically Woburn, Massachusetts. It's spelled Woobun, and the locals call it Woburn. It's outside of Boston, and it's where a lot of people who graduated from MIT, which stands for Made in Taiwan. Not really. I'm just joking, and I'm telling you, I'm going to explain why. Because someone asked me in the comments, "Why do you call it Made in Taiwan?" Because in the 50s, they were recruiting intellectual coolie labor, Asian, people good in math and science. They were recruiting them from Taiwan back there, and then they said, "Well, okay, now we want to bring in China into this," and then they start bringing Chinese. That was like in the 80s. That's where we're at today. So that's why we used to joke around because there were so many Taiwanese running around in MIT. Now maybe they should call MIT, MIC, Made in China, or that maybe that's properly. They should call that Harvard University or Yale, whatever it is. That's where all the leadership, they send their kids there to Yale. It's only appropriate because that's where they workshop the whole New World Order, right? With the Opium Wars and the Russell Company, the Russell Trust, and all that. So yeah, the chickens have come home to roost. In this case, it's a Gung Pao chicken that's come home to roost. So here we have a spring deal. Okay, this is a reverb. It simulates a reverberation, like you're in a cavern or a bathroom that has tile on it. Gives a really nice, and it's a good pedal. Don't get me wrong, which is one of the reasons I got it. But I'm more interested in the interface it has here. They call their interface technology neuro, as in neurology, as in neuroscience. And yet, those of you who've been watching this channel know I'm very much interested in innovations in neuroscience. And what you can do with this USB cable is plug it into your computer, and you can dial in certain presets. Perhaps you got a Daniel Lanois reverb sound, or you got a Bono, or the Edge, as he likes to call himself, right? You'll have the Edge reverb, and you can play along at home with it like a Guitar Hero, right? That's the name of a video game, because it's all going to be Guitar Hero pretty soon. It's going to be a video game. It's not going to be for you. It's going to be for Bono, and you get to look at his incredible vintage guitar collection and his amplifiers and all his tape effects. But you're not going to get near them. The closest you're going to get to making music is a little mouse like this. Anyway, I'm sorry to be presenting such a dark vision of the future. And I only do it because we can avert this. And before we leave here, I'll try to provide some suggestions. Well, before I get taken off the stream, I'll give you one suggestion right now. I learned this from, I had it confirmed with none other than our friend, John O'Loughlin, who's trained as an opera singer, and he's a singer, right? He's a musician. He understands. So I asked him a question about tuning 440 versus 432 hertz, and we had sort of a nerd out moment for a while. But the what I was trying to really understand from his perspective as a opera singer, someone who does it right, as opposed to someone who just kind of talks about it, and that's okay too. There's room for critics, but he's a singer. He's got to generate the tone and the voice, and he's got to negotiate the different octaves in his voice. And and he has to master the repertoire, and he knows the difficulties of it, right? It's an art, it's a craft. It's not something that you can understand by being a sort of a spectator. It's not a spectator sport, not like Guitar Hero. Yeah, that is a spectator sport. No matter how good you get on a video game, you're always going to be a spectator. But anyway, I had confirmed that I should tune from hereafter into 432, which is known as the Verdi tuning, down from 440. I've been doing that. Any recordings that I do from hereafter are going to be, this hooks onto your headstock, picks up the vibrations, because we're talking about vibrations, frequency, picks up the vibrations, transmits it to this, and reads out 432 hertz. Yeah, and that's where you should be. So that's going to help us. Simple as that sounds, that's going to help us to overcome this capture and control co-optation of all the great records of the time, and a lot of those are going to be, going down the memory hole. Some of them, I think, are probably going to be re-engineered with carrier waves, and they're going to be heterodyned for what is popularly known as mind control. All this catalog here, and the owners can do whatever they want with it. Bob Dylan has sold his catalog, Joni Mitchell, all of them. Willingly or not, that's Norman Smith. Yeah, 432. You feel me, brother. So who knows? They have no say-so anymore. They can refuse to license it. The owners now, they can trash it. They can take all the files and just demagnetize, or just get rid of them. Hopefully, and that's why we need these hard physical copies of books as well as CDs, DVDs. It has this is the original bit here. Okay, so anyway, moving away from Rick Beato, he did a follow-up. He was quite a program. I guess it was April 3rd or 4th or 5th or something. He did a follow-up, which is more of a rant about an article written about Paul Simon. Some guy wrote something disparaging about Paul Simon. It's about time that Paul Simon cashes out. He's not as good as Bob Dylan or the Beatles. His music is not going to, it's not going to hold up. I happen to agree with Rick Beato. It will hold up. I know personally, from my own amusement, I know more Paul Simon tunes from memory than I do Dylan songs. Dylan songs are very personal. That's why I'm always kind of reluctant to try to learn them. Although I know, the standards when you're first starting on guitar, Dylan is really good because he's a great songwriter. He's got good melodies, and his chords are very simple. They're folk chords, or what we call cowboy chords, right? And so you could learn "Blowing in the Wind" very easily. But if you sing it, it's like, oh my God, we have to listen to this again. On the other hand, if you can play 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover by Paul Simon, which it was on his first solo album, which I learned those really incredible, interesting jazz kind of voicings and the rhythm. Paul Simon's a great guitarist. I don't know who he studied with, but he's always been a great finger stylist, Paul Simon. So anyway, this guy who wrote this article about Paul Simon is not even important here, and that's the point I'm trying to make in bringing up the Rick Beato reaction, because it's quite predictable, right? He's not asking if I may be so bold as to suggest, he is not asking the right question. He's asking, why don't record companies believe in young artists? They should be supporting these people who, over time, like Bono and U2, and even the Beatles. It took them 2 or 3, 4 albums before they became the Beatles, with such albums as Rubber Soul and Revolver, and then Abbey Road. My gosh, but they're just not doing anymore. So he's asking that question. And as most of you know by now, if you're not asking the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. So what is the question then, if I can be arrogant? The real question is, why? What is the end game here? Why are these corporations so interested now in scooping up all these evergreen blue chip properties, these music compositions, these copyrighted evergreen songs? Well, I think it's more than just corporate greed. That's usually the typical answer. It's not just the suits, the bookkeepers, the pencil pushers. They always like to blame the accountants, and maybe they do, shoulder some of the blame, but they're just paid employees. But it's the usual response. That's what I want to get past. That's what I want to get beyond, right? So with all respects to Rick Beato, even though you have 2 million subscribers and I only have 6,000 and growing, I have to say that Professor Hamamoto is going to ask a deeper question, and it has to do with the nature of sound making and frequency making itself, right? And I'll say it again, the underlying problem, it's not just a matter of profit and loss for the record labels. And by the way, while I'm at it, let's take a look at that phrase, record label. That term, that phrase, record label, it has ceased a long time ago. It has ceased to be meaningful. Right. I mean, it's okay for us talking informally and casually, but if you want among artists and fans, because before records used to be flat and they had a label that used to be glued on there. That's what they mean by record label. It was a physical 45 or 33 or in the real old days, like my dad's collection, 78s, right? They had a label on there. They were glued on there. So yeah, I get the colloquial meaning of them, but that's not what I'm getting at here. I'm talking about record labels in the conventional sense being owned not just by the 3 or 4 global corporations that owned most of media, right? They're called Sony, and Columbia is owned by someone else. I can't keep track of all different acquisitions and move around. It's just like publishing. They're all kind of owned by a handful. And that's where a lot of the criticism itself rests. It's a corporation. And I was guilty of that myself. I thought, well, yeah, all we have to do is reform corporations or really look into the origins of corporate law and then modify it or do away with it. And then the problem will be solved. But since then, over the past several years, I couldn't understand that. Ask the question. Again, asking the question, the answer is embodied in the question. Answer the question, well, who owns the corporations? Well, yeah, they're owned by central banks. Who owns the central banks? Who controls the central banks? Who uses the central banks or its geographic districts, because they're not part of the countries that they function in. Tokyo, where the Bank of Japan is situated, is not part of Japan. The City of London is not part of Britain, is not part of England. It's its own little sovereign entity. And the same goes for Washington, D.C., and Wall Street is part of, I guess, Manhattan, but it operates like a sovereign entity. You get what I'm saying? Those little islands that we think are part of our nation and part of our economy are in truth owned by these hereditary elite banking families that in modern time, by modern, I'm talking about 400 or 500 years ago. That's what I mean by modern. But in the modern age that spawned modern banking, let's put it that way, originated in Venice. And if you look at the LaRouche histories and listen to Harley Schlanger and John O'Loughlin's reading, you'll understand that these and other people who were in that circle. Can't remember some of their names, but there's been some really good historical research done on the Venetian banking system. That's the historical origins. It went up to Britain. It took root in the City of London. It crossed the ocean through the Dutch financiers as well as British, and more recently German. And China is a player to a certain extent, but they're not at the same level as your banking oligarchs of 500 years ago. They're trying to break into it, and it's going to be interesting to see when those families go to war. Hopefully, we'll be able to survive that conflict. It's not going to be pretty, and whenever the big boys fight, we're the ones that pay the cost in terms of lives lost. And maybe that's what's going on right now, right during this lockdown phase here. Maybe it's the war of these globalist oligarch families who are trying to divide up the world through the banking system. And I mention this because one of the prizes here, one of the energy resources that are being captured in the process of being captured is music publishing, is music itself, and all that inheres in what we call music, the frequencies, the energies, the creativity, the imagination, the metaphors, the poetry, the similes, the rhymes, the schemes, the sentiments, the heart-rending scenarios that you hear in these love songs, the tragedies. Man, can you imagine that? That's going to be held and controlled by just a really small segment of the human population. And these people they might not even be human. They might be reptiles. So do you think that's a just a sort of a trivial matter of profit and loss, and not cultivating young, immature talent, and being so short-sighted, not giving them a no, no, no. That's what these psyops people want you to believe. And we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that, aren't we? We're watching this channel, and we know there's more at stake and more at play at in these series of transactions. By the way, I was going to go into the whole relationship between organized crime and the music industry. Most of you know that already, and so do I. In case someone wants to make a comment, well, what about the mafia and all? Yeah, I've read most of those books. I think I've read all of them. And whenever there's these insider accounts of the music industry or the film industry or entertainment or sports, it always has to focus strictly on the mafia. It's all mobbed up with the betting and the doping and blah, which is true. It's true. But I'm trying to look beyond the dangle, right? Look beyond the angle of the dangle and get to the heat of the meat, right? And the heat of the meat is in these banking oligarchs. They throw out the mafia lord. They make all kinds of movies about that. They do Netflix specials, right? Talking about, the Godfather this and Godfather that, right? Morris Levy has a biography, which I bought because I read this stuff. Morris Levy, who's a mafioso, I think, out of Philadelphia, who I read about in a book called Hitman by Frederick Danner, or these other ones. In fact, if you know a group by the name of James and the Shondells, Tommy James, right? Crimson and Clover, Hanky Panky, all those great tunes. His whole book is called Me and the Mob and whatever. And I've read that one too. It's interesting. His whole career was based on, all of them are. You don't think the Beatles were connected? You don't think Brian Epstein was connected with the criminal underworld of London? Not just the financial criminal underworld, not just the hard guys who say, you're going to stock this record here. It's called the Beatles. You put it in your shelves. Otherwise, if it's not there when we come back, but we'll have to give you an offer you can't refuse. But, there was also the sexual underground, the sexual outlaws. That Brian Epstein was found dead, beaten up by rough trade. These were like a sadomasochist sex play that was involved. So, even the mop top, the cute mop tops that we saw on the Ed Sullivan Show when we were kids and have been lionized forever, they, through Brian Epstein, was connected, and on and on and on. The Beach Boys and all, Jan and Dean, pick anybody, Annette Funicello, all the Frankies, Frankie Avalon, Frankie Fontaine, Frankie this, Frankie that, the people that came out of the doo-woppers out of Philadelphia. My God, there's a book out on Berry Gordy Jr. and Motown. Not only did he underpay him, but he was connected to them. Come on, man, grow up. I told you in a previous talk, I don't mind organizing. I'm okay with the criminals. Look how much great music they brought. Look at all the great restaurants they've opened up and closed, and all the great celebrity chefs they put forward. Look at the movie business. Where would we be without American gangsterism? We'd be at a very, very, really low state of accomplishment. They're like patrons. They're like the Medici, right? So, I'm okay with that. Now, where I draw the line is when you start funding operations that kill large numbers of people. As long as you're killing each other for turf, that's okay. That's cool. But when you start killing women and children and innocent people, civilians, as you guys like to call them, then you're no longer criminal. You're still a criminal, but you're a war criminal at that point. And there's a higher court at which you will be judged. So that's what I'm just saying this because some people are upset that I said, yeah, I like gangsters. They're incredible. They've financed all kinds of interesting ventures where the banks wouldn't. And of course, the banks are criminal entities as well, if you want to look at it objectively. Okay, so let me continue with after going off on that rant. So I'm not going to go on the mafia stuff for now because I'm trying to get a little bit out of this or put some of this out in the last 10 minutes or so here. What I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is that this great sell-off and the buy-off of these companies like by hypnosis and other, they're probably a front entity for probably, not probably, but perhaps for some of the usual suspects. I won't name them, right? The families that we all know and love and read about and obsess over in other YouTube channels, people who've been talking about these people for the last 30, 40, 50. Yeah, I've read that stuff. I'm going to talk about now, and I'm talking about our survival into the future. So part of this so-called Great Reset, it is the capture controlling of our resources, right? Energy, we know, right? Nuclear, yellow cake, oil, all of it, human energy. Yeah, human beings, labor is an energy source, but also energy is creative energy, these are frequencies. Consider this an energy resource as well. And as you know, the people who are the descendants of the Venetians want it all. It's full spectrum dominance as it's been described, right? It's also full spectrum capture and control. None of it is going to be left on the table if these people have their way. If we don't start tuning down to 432 hertz, we're going to be in trouble. But seriously, there's even more evasive action that we can take. One of them is start publishing your own book, so you're not going to be at the mercy of Bezos.com, and start publishing your own music, sending through files and going through different networks that are difficult to hack and impossible to trace down. Human beings, and that's why I enjoy criminals, because they always figure out ways to get around the system. They know how to game the laws, game the rules. The resourcefulness of the criminal, who, they have to feed their families right outside the law, is admirable. And I think we have to start thinking. We don't have to behave like we don't have to. I'm not encouraging lawlessness or breaking the law, breaking any type of regulations, local, federal, or otherwise, and pay your taxes, pay your parking fines. Don't be a scofflaw. Be a law-abiding American citizen, which means you're a law-abiding piece of chattel owned by Wall Street. You know that one, right? It comes out of your, you identify with your genotype, who you are and what you're worth. Abide by all the laws. What I'm saying is that we're going to, as we slowly claw back our freedom and our sovereignty, as it's been enshrined in all the great institutions in our founding documents, we have to survive into the next day. And one of the great tools of survival is our culture, is our music, our food cultures, right? Literature, the reading, the stories. We can still generate that, and the pharmaceutical combines are doing what they can to try to screw up with our neurons, our amygdala, especially of the children, so that they will not have the brain capacity or the emotional endowment necessary to come up with important and interesting creative work, right? And that's all part of the process of making us into drones, not the ones that fly around, but sort of drones like in a beehive. We serve a certain function, then we die, right? That's the model that they have. We're insects, we're wasps, we're ferrets, we're monkeys. I think they don't have been accord us status of a warm-blooded creature. And these are reptiles. Who should, how did they get in charge, right? Are we smarter than lizards? Apparently not. But they have human help that are taking them to their end game, which is our enslavement. So let me very quickly look at some articles that I acquired yesterday and today. Yeah, I spent all day looking at material, and I have whole files, old ones that I didn't bother looking at. So I just got a whole new crop here. Here's an editorial from an academic journal. The editorial's titled Music and AI. And AI, of course, is artificial intelligence. Who are some of the people who are the authors? It's interesting. The lead author is someone at the University of Malta. Wow, the Maltese are still out at it. Wow, hey, Malta comes up a lot of times in the George Webb reportage, doesn't it? It could be that those people, when they fought the Battle of the Crusades with the Crusaders and the opposing, the Knights Templar fighting the Muslim, the Ottoman Empire later on, right? Hey, they're still and they're doing science, right? That's their new Templar shield and sword. And who else? Okay, Carnegie Mellon, huge IT place, right? School of Computer Science, State University of New Jersey and New Brunswick, of course, on and on. But here's the little capsule summary. Music and AI. Computer algorithms have been shaping the music scene since the 1950s. Very true, ladies and gentlemen. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computational methods have left their mark not only on the way that music is composed and performed, but also on the adoption of new musical notations. Different music learning approaches, as well as different marketing strategies, which change the way music is consumed. Okay, so there's all this theoretical work that Wall Street investors have been handed, and they understand that they have to capture and control the new music. By the way, just as an aside, I have happened to have been studying this recently. The title of this is Columbia/Princeton, as in university, Columbia University/Princeton Electronic Music Center. And this was research that was being done in the 40s and the 50s on computer music. They weren't doing it just for fun or just to be avant-garde or just to explore some sort of boutique interest on music generation. No, this was all part of the Venetian banking vision of the future and how to capture music in 2021. It's a decades-long process. They have infinite amounts of money because they print it, right, and resources in order to execute their program. Most of these people, and I'm not denigrating or taking away their contributions any fashion whatsoever. Who am I, after all? But they weren't cognizant that they were being used in this fashion. They just thought they were being artists, and artists is their responsibility, their duty, their calling is to explore the nature of the human aesthetic experience. So I'm not knocking them, but yeah, we're in a very advanced stage, advanced to the point where now they can start shelling out money, which is not very much. $400 million for the Dylan catalog compared to the fortunes that these bankers have at their disposal is a drop in the bucket. Bob Dylan, the voice of his generation, was like you and me. He was Mr. Tambourine Man, right? He was singing and shucking and jiving, whatever, and whoever put the money in his tambourine gets the song, right? So we're pretty much the same. He had his cake and he got to eat it. He got to write all these great songs all along the Watchtower with great cadences and great images and rhymes and meaning that we all sit around and try to decrypt. And he was, he lived a pretty good life. But I think he got the word at a certain point. If you want to end your life in the fashion that you envisioned and want to die a natural death, then Mr. Bob Dylan, Robert Zimmerman on his legal documents, it's time that you sold your catalog to us. We're going to own it now, and we're going to do with it what we please. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to that music. Maybe it'll all go into a soundtrack of the new lockdown economy. Maybe they'll be singing, the answer is blowing in the Happy Meal. Maybe it'll become the theme song of Amazon or of Netflix. Maybe Netflix will have its own corporate sing-alongs to the great Joni Mitchell songs, right? I was a free man in Paris, but I was a slave at Netflix. That's how that song will be rewritten. So this is where we're at today, ladies and gentlemen. I had a whole slew of articles that I was going to go through here to try to impress upon you the degree to which how far we've stayed. Here's one just very quickly. I have 1 minute. Mind or Matter Over Mind. That's the main title. Subtitle: A randomized control trial of single session biofeedback training on performance anxiety and the heart rate variability in music. So, or in musicians. So even the performers being studied through the new, not so new science of neuroscience, neuropsychology. There's books on the emotional line. And by the way, a lot of this work on emotional intelligence and psychology, human psychology, the lessons learned from there are going to be transferred to machines, right? Because that, I don't have to tell you, but I will. This is part of the larger post-human agenda that we're seeing. These algorithms, all these studies they've done that they'll be able to put into formulaic technologies. That means that all the composition and the audience itself, what remains of it, will be controlled through algorithmic artificial general intelligence, right? You've heard that scenario before, and it sounds trite and trivial, but it is a real simple goal here. But I'm trying to tell you how this process is unfolding, and I think it's a warning to us that all these great stars, musical artists, let's call them, because they're not really in the star system. That's movies primarily and TV. But these great artists themselves, how their contributions are in the process of being captured and controlled. It has less to do with them, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, and has more to do with our fate as human beings. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave off, and perhaps I'll try to pick up some of the loose threads next time. Thank you very much for joining me today. After you leave this stream, put on some vinyl on your turntable, or if you really need to, put on a CD of your favorite music and absorb it, listen to it, appreciate, embrace it, and hang on to it, and make the music. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciated being with you here today. See you Wednesday. See you Thursday. Goodbye.